You've been asked to play your first game of D&D. You have no idea what to do. You go on YouTube and you see shows like Critical Role and Dimension 20, and now you're scared. You can't do voices. You're not funny. So how can you sit at a table and play a game like that? Here's the honest truth. Most D&D and other TTRPGs are not like that. Critical Role and Dimension 20 are amazing because they are professional voice actors, professional comedians, professional dungeon masters who have decades of experience under their belt. The table you sit at will not be like that. Picture the first scene from Stranger Things, the first season. Kids sitting in a basement, rolling dice, doing math, telling a story. That's what D&D is. Now, I know you heard the word math and some people out there are freaking out. It is very simple, basic math. You roll a die, add one number to that die number, get your total. That's it. But there's a lot more than that. But it's not complicated. So, that's what today's player tip video is all going to be about. What do you, as a first-time player, need to know for your first game of D&D? What is it? How do you play? What are your characters? We'll go into all of that. Come on back, let's sit down and talk about what you need to do and what you need to know to make your first game of D&D a success. The first thing you should do, whether the campaign is starting from scratch with everybody or you're joining midstream, is sit down with the Dungeon Master and have a Session 0. Session 0 is where the Dungeon Master will tell you about the world, the campaign, the setting, high magic, low magic, will tell you about any restrictions. There's no dwarves in this world. Silvery barbs, it's a spell, is banned. You'll learn about any house rules. House rules are the rules that the DM has tweaked or changed to make them different than rules as written per the official rules of D&D. Keep in mind, there are no such thing as official rules of D&D. D&D is like the pirate code in Pirates of the Caribbean, more like a guideline. So the DM can set up rules for their table however they want. So when you sit down as a Session 0, you'll learn about all that. You'll also learn about other players' lines and veils. Lines and veils are things other players don't want to talk about at all, or you can have occur, but they happen off camera, per se, so to speak, right? So we talk about it, but it's all resolved off camera, fade to black kind of deal. Lines and veils are very important. It's how you respect your other players, and we'll get into that later on in another section of this video. So, insist to have a Session 0 with your DM, even if it's just one-on-one with you and them because you're joining midstream. It helps you, especially if you're a new player. You want to know about certain things. Plus, Session 0 is also where you create your character. Now, looking at a character sheet, it can be daunting initially. But before we get into character sheets, let's hear from our good friend, Advertising Rich, with this week's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Only Crits. Do you love sharp-edged dice? What about dice with things inside of them like dots? What about metal dice, both solid and hollow? How about mystery bags of dice? I know I can't resist those mystery bags of dice at my friendly local game store. I just always have to buy one when I pop in. What about dice trays and dice cases? Well, Only Crits has you dice goblins and dice dragons taken care of. They have everything you can ever want when it comes to dice, and each one of us can always use more dice in our lives. So, click the link in the description to go to Only Crits, let them know the Laughing Tavern sent you, and enter the code MIZOCRITS at checkout for 10% off your order. Thanks to Only Crits for sponsoring this video. There are many ways to fill out your character sheet, filling it out in many different orders. So, for today, for my example, I'm going to do it how I fill out my sheet. I start with species, dwarf, elf, human, and class. Fighter, paladin, rogue. I do this because those decisions will drive future decisions on my character sheet. They will determine what I do with my ability scores, where I put them. They will determine what backgrounds I take, what equipment I take. All that is driven by species and class. One thing to keep in mind is there are classes that will be harder for a new player to play. However, don't listen to anybody that tells you you can't play a class because it is your first time playing. Play the class you want to play. If you are at a good table with a good DM and good players, they will always help you out. So yes, you may struggle with certain classes compared to others, but play what you want to play. It's a key thing to ensure your enjoyment of this game. The only caveat I would put on that is if the DM has said certain classes are off the table. No artificers. Sorry, we don't use artificers at my table. But just like before, that should have been covered in session 0. So I like to pick species and class and start from there. Name, I'm not too worried about name right away. Name will come by the time I get done finishing out their character sheet. So let's move on to ability scores. There are 6 key ability scores in Dungeons & Dragons. Strength, kind of obvious. How strong is your character? Dexterity, how nimble, agile, and quick is your character? Constitution, how tough is your character? How can it withstand the elements? How can it withstand damage? Wisdom and intelligence are very close to each other. I like to look at it as wisdom is street smarts. You've learned by watching. You've learned nature. You've learned how to follow a deer's path in the woods. Intelligence is book smarts. What have you learned? What have you studied? Charisma basically boils down to, can you sing and dance? Can you tell a lie? And can you persuade somebody to do something for you? It's basically what charisma is. So those 6 stats will drive every dice roll you make going forward based upon what their number is. Let's talk about how do you get the numbers. Your DM will tell you how to roll your scores, okay? There's manual where you actually roll d6s to determine your score. They can be a max of 18 if you roll 3 d6s, if you roll 3 6s, or they could be a 3. All depends upon how the dice are rolling for you. And that is where the pros and cons of rolling for stats come into play, is you can have big swings. You can have one stat that's a 6 and one's an 18. You can get almost close to 20 based upon backgrounds and species if you roll 3 6s. So a lot of DMs don't prefer that. A lot of them will use one of the following 2 methods. I use dice rolling because I like those swings, because I think the high stats and low stats bring extra to the role-playing side of Dungeons & Dragons. There is point buy and standard array. What these 2 are is a set batch of numbers. Either standard array, which says you can have stats of 15, 13, 12, 10, and 8, or standard array, point buy, where you have 35 points or something to pick and choose between your 6 stats. So you come up with a balanced number, or you have a bigger swing in one and you take it away from another because you only have so many points you can put into your character, okay? Now, don't quote me at the numbers for either standard array or point buy. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, and I don't want to stop and look because I don't really use them in my games, so I do the dice. But these 2 forms allow the DM to control cheating and to ensure that the party is a little bit more balanced. You're not going to have one player with 3 18s and 3 6s. You could, but only if they roll for it, and even then, that's going to be a how do they do that, okay? So your DM will tell you how to do it. The classes have requirements for what ability scores you want to have for each. Some of them have minimum requirements, such as a fighter, you have to have a 13 in strength or dex in order to be a fighter. So when you figure out what your scores are, if you already know what class you're playing, you know where to put your numbers, where to put them. You know what? My fighter is going to have no charisma, but he's going to have super high strength, super high con, super high dex, because that's what the numbers came up. So it really helps you in figuring out how you want your character to be. Now, these numbers create ability score modifiers. It is the modifiers that are the most important numbers in all of Dungeons and Dragons. Every single die roll will use one of the modifiers to add or subtract from that dice roll. So if you have a super high strength, you may be adding a +4 or a +5 to that roll, minimum. If you have an 8 strength, so you're at a -1, you're going to be subtracting 1 from every time you have to make a strength roll. The modifiers go up by 1 for every even number above 10, 10 being the baseline humanoid. So if you have a 12, your modifier is a +1. If you have an 8, your modifier is a -1. 9 and 11 are zeros. They don't change until you hit the even numbers. So I know it's a lot. It's a lot simpler once you write the numbers down on your character sheet, and you start to realize that it looks like a lot. There's a lot of numbers there, but all it really matters is that modifier. And another section of the character sheet will take those modifiers into account to make it even simpler for you, so you're not adding numbers from a bunch of different places. Speaking of which, let's talk skills. Skills are different things your character can do. Can they climb a wall really fast? It's going to be athletics, so they're pulling themselves up the wall. However, if you're rogue, you might be able to convince your DM to let you use acrobatics because you jump and flip your way up the wall. Nature. How are you with nature? Animal handling. Did you grow up on a farm? You might be better at animal handling than you think. The DM wants you, if you want to find a path through the woods, the DM is going to have you roll survival. These are all skill checks based off of ability scores. So acrobatics is dex based. So if I have a dex of 14, I have a +2 dex. My acrobatics ability score is a +2. If I'm proficient in it, I will also add my proficiency bonus. This is another number on your character sheet up near the top that determines how proficient your character is in the world. When you first start out at level 1, you're a +2. So if you're proficient in acrobatics, you take your +2 dex plus your +2 proficiency bonus, now you have a +4. So when your DM asks you to make an acrobatics roll, you roll a d20 and you will add a +4 to whatever that total is. So if you roll a 12, you actually had a 16 acrobatics check. So it sounds like it's a lot, but it actually isn't. Each skill has the modifier it's used by listed next to it. If you're using the 2014 character sheets or D&D Beyond, skill checks are in a bigger block, so each skill is listed individually with the associated skill or ability score with it. If you're using the 2024 version of the character sheet, where the ability scores are, you will see the associated skills listed with it. Either way, all that really matters is, are you proficient in the skill and what is your modifier? Like I said, acrobatics uses dex, so you add in whatever your dex modifier is. And if you have proficiency in dex, you would add your proficiency bonus. Certain classes can end up with something called expertise. These are rogues and bards for the most part. Other classes can get expertise along the way. But rogues and bards are going to be your two biggest expertise classes. This means they double their proficiency bonus for that skill check. So if you have a proficiency bonus of +2, and you have expertise, that'd be +4. So that same acrobatics check, if I'm a rogue and I have expertise in acrobatics, when my DM asks me to make an acrobatics check, I would roll my d20 and then add +6 to it instead of +4. Big swing, right? Makes you even better at doing acrobatics checks. So when you are playing the game and the DM asks for a skill check, you generally want the player in the party that has the best ability skill check score to make that check. You don't want the clumsy wizard with no dex trying to check for traps on a chest, right? You want the rogue doing it. Just like you wouldn't want the rogue going up and studying this weird magic item and telling you if it's any good or not. You want the wizard doing it, because chances are the wizard is proficient in Arcana. Each skill check serves a purpose in the game. The DM will ask for a roll of some sort of one of those, usually. So go by with what the DM is asking for. Also, you as the player, while it's nice to say, I want to insight check that guy, in reality, your player would say, is he lying? And then the DM would ask you to make the insight roll. So it all depends upon how you are being immersed into your character and what the DM wants to have happen at the table. We'll talk about more on that a little bit down the road. So skill checks, it looks daunting. There's a lot of stats there. There's a lot of numbers there. But keep in mind, you're only going to be rolling 1d20 and adding one of those to that d20 roll. So it's not as bad as it looks. And because you have it written down, you don't have to memorize what you have in any skill check. Saving throws are a special kind of ability check, special kind of skill check. The DM will have you make a saving throw to avoid certain things happening to your character. If the wizard casts Fireball right in the middle of where you're standing, the DM will have you make a dex save, a dexterity saving throw. How well is your character at jumping out of the explosion? Your barbarian may have to make a wisdom save when that mage realizes he can charm the barbarian much easier than he can the cleric. Saving throws can make or break an encounter sometimes, because if that barbarian gets charmed because he's not proficient in wisdom saves and he had a very bad wisdom score, chances are that barbarian is going to be turned and now attacking the party. Death saves are a special kind of saving throw. Death saves are the roll you make with a d20 when your character is dropped to 0 hit points. Nothing gets added. It's just a straight d10, or d20. 10 or higher, you succeed. 9 or lower, you fail. 3 successes, your character is alive. 3 failures, your character is dead. Now, the basic scores for all the saving throws are, just like the skill checks, are based off of the ability scores. So you start with that basic modifier. Your class will determine what proficiency, if you get proficiency in certain saving throws, and just like with the skill checks, that means you can add your proficiency bonus to it. So this is how a rogue ends up with crazy plus 15 dexterity save later in the later stages of the games, because they're super proficient in it. Their dex is high. It's crazy, but you can end up with some crazy numbers. So just another piece that the ability score helped filled in. So again, lots of numbers on the sheet, but you're only ever going to need one at a time. There's a couple more areas on the sheet I want to touch on briefly. Speed is determined by your class, by your species, I mean. Armor class is determined upon what type of armor you're wearing, what class you are, because they will determine what numbers get added together. For instance, Dex and Con, so armor class can be a little confusing, but it's simple to fill out if you equip leather armor, for example, versus wearing no armor if you're a barbarian or a monk. Your DM will definitely help you through that. The key to remember is what your armor class total is, just like what any creatures who are attacking, what their AC is. In order to be hit, you or your enemy has to either meet or beat the number in your AC, and you have to do the same for them. If your AC is 15, but the DM rolls a 14 for that goblin attacking you, they miss. And if you roll a 14 and the goblin's AC is 16, you miss. But if the AC is 14 and you roll a 14, you hit. That's really the big thing that matters for armor class, is whether you get hit or not. Down in the other part of this sheet, you'll see your equipment, your spells. This is where you list out everything that fits in those categories. Spells known will be in spells, and equipment you're carrying going equipment. Anything you can use to attack will be listed in the attack section. Now, just like with skill checks, your ability score modifiers determine how successful you are with an attack based upon the class you are, the weapon you are wielding, all that. So, for an example, a barbarian carrying a greatsword has a +4 to attack if he has an 18 strength. So I roll a d20, add +4 to that score. If it meets or beats the enemy's AC, he hits. To do damage, it's going to be 1d12 plus the ability score modifier, plus, in this case, proficiency bonus, because the barbarian is going to be proficient with the greatsword or the great axe or whatever it is. So it'll be a d12 plus 6 at level 1. Not a lot of damage, but it can be. Spell attacks are basically the same. There's a little bit of math involved for your spell attack modifier, but the spells say what kind of damage it is. And normally they don't add in your modifiers to it. It's going to be 3d6, 1d10, that kind of thing. Being a caster can be a little bit more difficult to take in right away. Not impossible though. So like I said earlier, play a caster. Casters can be great. You can do a lot of stuff with casters, especially as you level up. It just makes math a lot easier because the spell tells you what damage it does. You don't have to sit there and look and see, okay, it's a d12 plus 4 plus my proficiency. When it comes to your character sheet, this is where using something like D&D Beyond really helps, because D&D Beyond has taken all that and put it together, and you don't have to figure it out yourself. A plain printed out character sheet, you still end up with the same number in the same spot, but you have to do all the math yourself. Reading the player's handbook, which tells you that one is strength plus proficiency. That is it's 8 plus your spellcast modifier plus proficiency. So the numbers can be a little confusing initially, but again, the DM will help you fill all of that out. And D&D Beyond, and this isn't a plug for them, I know there's lots of issues, it doesn't always work properly, but I personally love it because it makes life simpler for the new player. It is really hit the ground running because it fills in everything for you. Now we get into the fun part. So that was your character sheet. Like I said, it looks a lot more daunting than it actually is, because you'll never be asked to roll more than one die at a time for one number on that sheet, and you just find it and add whatever that number tells you to. Now let's talk about how to actually play D&D. Playing D&D is rather simple. The Dungeon Master describes a scene. You as the player determine how you want to interact with it. That's it. We can go home now. But all kidding aside, that's basically it. The Dungeon Master will describe a scene in front of the players. The players approach a chasm. It is 100 feet deep, 30 feet wide. What do? You as the players decide what you want to do. Do you have abilities or items that will allow you to easily cross that 30-foot gap? Oh, the barbarian can just pretty much jump across it. Same with the monk. Yeah, but what about that little halfling? He's not going to make that jump. Oh, the barbarian wants to toss him across the chasm? All right, let's make a roll. That's it. D&D is basically deciding what you want to do with the information that the Dungeon Master is giving you. Then the Dungeon Master will determine what type of roll is needed to determine what the outcome is. If the barbarian wants to toss that halfling across the chasm, he absolutely can try. The Dungeon Master will have him make an athletics check. Athletics, as we discussed earlier, is simply a skill check. The barbarian will roll a d20, add his athletics score to that d20 roll, and the Dungeon Master has a DC in his head for how difficult will this be. A DC of 5 is very simple. A DC of 10 is about right in the middle. DC of 15, starting to get harder. DC of 20? All right, now this is going to be a little bit difficult. DC of 25? Damn near impossible. DC of 30? The gods have to intervene for that to work, especially at low levels. So, the Dungeon Master may set a DC of, let's say, 13 for the tossing a halfling across. It's not a big gap for the big strong barbarian, but there's a little bit of a win. So let's not make this too easy, but let's make it workable. Now, the Dungeon Master does not have to tell you what the DC is to succeed or not. Some do, some don't. It depends upon the Dungeon Master. So you would roll your D20, add your athletics. Does a 13 hit? Does a 13 succeed? You watch as the barbarian grabs the halfling, tosses him, and it looks like the halfling's not going to quite make it, but he lands just on the edge of the cliff and pulls himself up and is fine. Does a DC 12 work? Well, the barbarian tosses that halfling. Strong breeze comes through. It stops the halfling just short. And you all watch in horror as the halfling begins to fall into the 100-foot chasm. Now what do you do? That's basically breaking down D&D to its most basic feature of how to play. Dungeon Master tells you something. You as the players decide how you want to react to what he just told you, what they just told you. How do you interact with the world that is being described? A goblin's in front of you. I want to roll to attack. All right, everybody, let's roll initiative. It's really that simple. It sounds worse than it is. It sounds like it's a lot of math, but it is math, but it's basic math. It's simple math. It's +4, +6, +9, -2. It's one roll and basic math. It's more about how you as the player immerse yourself in the world and immerse yourself into your character. Now that we know the basics of what our characters are and who our characters are and how to play the game, what are some things you as a player should do and don't do at the table? One of the biggest things you should do is immerse yourself into your character. You do this by thinking how your character would think. Is your character a meek little wizard that likes to sit in the back and cast spells? Then don't have them leading the way into the fight. Is your character the brain-dead barbarian that just hits things? You wouldn't have them solving the puzzle or trying to talk philosophy with the wizard. Be your character. But don't justify being a shitty character and doing shitty things in world by saying that's what my character would do. Yes, we get it. Your character grew up a thief and he would always try to steal from his party members. No, don't. All that does is bring up animosity between the actual players at the game and can cause animosity between the PCs too, because if your character is always doing something stupid or running off ahead and always setting off the traps because he's out looking for himself, he's just going to cause problems. So, be your character, but be your character in a way that helps the party, not hurts it. Speaking of things not to do, don't be an edgelord. Don't be that loner who is sitting off on the side and always wants to be by themselves and doesn't get involved with the party. D&D is a collaborative, cooperative game. Have your character get in on discussions with the party to determine what to do next. Have your character be part of the party, not just with the party. It'll make your life better and it will make your party's life better going forward. Now, if you want to start off that way, but your plan is to have character growth and after a couple sessions the character changes his way, think Han Solo at the end of Star Wars, right? He was going to leave and then came back. It's all well and good. Works great for movies. However, if you drag that out over 15, 20, 30 sessions, the other people at the table are going to hate you and wonder why you're even there. If you're always going against the party, they're not going to like you. So be part of the party, okay? One of the big things, don't cheat. Don't do it. You cannot win Dungeons and Dragons, so there's no point in cheating. Let the dice tell the story. The DM is telling your story, you as a player. What happens at the table is what the players decide. They determine which way the story goes, along with the dice. Failures on the dice rolls are just as important as successes are. And I would say more so, because it is the failures that will bring in the beauty that is Dungeons and Dragons. You are more likely to remember the time that you failed miserably than the time you succeeded gloriously. That one failure of trying to jump across the chasm, but rolling in that one, is going to live on forever at the table. But you rolling a 23 and just clearing that chasm, nobody will remember that. Embrace failure. Roll with it. So don't cheat. There is absolutely no reason to. D&D is a balanced game. But if you are cheating, whether it's dice rolls, not marking off spell slots or abilities used, you're really just stealing from yourself. You're cheating yourself out of the experience. Part of the game is figuring out how did the party survive when you are 4 battles into the day and everybody's resources are spent and everybody's down to the last spell slot, but you're sitting over there like you've never fired a spell all day. Don't do it. Because cheating is probably the quickest way to get kicked from a table. So don't do it. Just enjoy yourself. Ask questions. If you're unsure about how something works, ask something. Like I've said before, if you are at a good table with good players and a good dungeon master, they'll happily answer your questions. Now, after a point, you should know how your character works. You don't have to know the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. That's what the DM is for. But you should know how your character functions. I'm not saying you have to memorize your spells or abilities perfectly, but come prepared knowing how your character functions. Don't be 30 sessions in wondering how sneak attack works. Or, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know I couldn't get sneak attack with that. There comes a point when you should know when you can and cannot get something from your character, from an ability, from an item, from a spell. Learn your character. Come prepared and come on time. Wrangling D&D players is like herding cats. You'll eventually have settled on a schedule, but either somebody always shows up 15 minutes late, somebody always cancels at the last possible minute. So show up on time. If the DM says we want dice rolling at 6, don't show up at 6 and just get setting up with your food that you didn't bring for anybody else, just yourself, and complain that you're having to jump right in and get started. Show up a quarter of. Eat your food. If you like to talk with all the other players before you get started about what happened over the last week, come earlier. The Dungeon Master should tell you what time the game will start. Find out what time you should be there, because guarantee you there's going to be 2 different times. In both of my games, we know the game starts at this time, but we generally show up half an hour, 45 minutes before that, so that we can eat, so that we can gibber and jabber amongst ourselves. Because once the dice start, we want to focus on the game. So show up on time and come prepared. Know your character. Like I said before, pay attention. When it's not your turn, and this is going to be big during combat, because combat can be slow, pay attention. Think about what you're going to do when it's your turn. Hopefully the DM will give you a little bit of a heads up. All right, John, you're up now. Rich, you're next. Oh, crap. All right, what am I going to do on my turn? Things change. You may have had an idea, I'm going to cast Fireball, but the rest of the party moved up and now they're in where you wanted to cast it. So now you don't want to cast Fireball there. Or you may. Depends. But you have to change up. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about sitting around on your phone and the Dungeon Master goes, hey, Rich, it's your turn. Rich, you're going to... All right, now, so what happened? No, don't be that guy. Pay attention. Now, I understand some people need to stay busy. It's how their brains work, and that's perfectly fine, but stay engaged. And that's even more so than paying attention. Paying attention is one thing, being engaged is another. Be actively listening and actively talking and thinking about what's going on at the table. Ask questions about the DM. If he just describes something, and you walk into this room, what's in the room? Do I see any doors out? Be engaged. That give and take between you, the other players, and the dungeon master is what's going to make D&D great. We've had sessions where we barely rolled any dice, but it was just conversations about moving the story forward. That's key too. Move the story forward. As a player, you always want to be thinking the improv theory of yes and. If somebody says something else, in your head, agree with it and add to it. Build on it. Yes, but's also a great way too. Even as a player, you can say, yeah, we can do that, but how about if we do it this way instead? Or how about Jim Bob does it this way? Great, perfect. You can also say no as a player to the other players. No, you don't want to. I don't think that's a good idea. Keep in mind, the DM also will use yes and, yes but, and probably also no but and straight up no. They are allowed. But ask. Try anything. If you trust me, there are some of the craziest things I've ever heard of come up at the table. Ask. You never know what the Dungeon Master will allow you to try. You can certainly try. The DM says that. Be careful. However, don't be the people I've heard about that use sitting at a D&D table to do the most perverse, nasty things because they think they can because they're at a D&D table. I'm talking about certain topics. Bestiality, incest, torture, rape. Don't be that guy. Hopefully, those kind of topics were nipped in the bud during session 0 by the Dungeon Master and the other players. However, even if they weren't, don't be that person that gives the rest of us that are in this hobby a bad name. Horror stories about players doing that kind of thing has been going on for years now. Just heard one today. And I'm still blown away that anybody would sit at a table and think just because D&D is a game where they can do anything, actually think they can do anything. How I always end my games, my videos. Love each other, be nice to each other, accept each other. Yes, you're going around killing goblins and you're stealing things, but be a good person at the table. Don't be that person. Speaking of which, if somebody has specifically set up a line or a veil, don't cross it. You want to get booted from a table, easiest way is cheating, and then constantly crossing lines or veils after being warned not to. Like I said, don't. It comes down to respect. Respect the other players you are sitting with. Politics, gender, sexual orientation, all of that is out the window when you're at the table. You are simply people sitting around the table playing a game that's been around for 50 years. Just enjoy the time with the people. Respect them. Your game will be better and you will be so much happier during each session. Respect the Dungeon Master. Chances are your Dungeon Master has put in hours, if not days, on the campaign every week. Painting minis, creating encounters, building maps, trying to figure out how this topic ties into this, which ties into this, trying to get it all to work out so that you have a campaign and at the end was amazing. Respect the DM. Disagree with the DM. Feel free. But once a ruling is made, move on. It is the DM's table. You may not agree with it. You may have valid reasons, but go with what the DM says. Just respect. If you respect the other people you're with, if you just do the bare minimum to stay engaged at the table, know your character, don't cheat, know when it's your turn, give and take back with the other players, you will love this amazing game. And if you get in with the right group of people and you do all these things, you'll make friends for life that will be telling stories about that one time the guy tried to kill the dragon and he slipped and killed himself on his own sword. You're going to tell that story. You're going to tell those stories of the amazing dice rolls and the hours and hours of session that you've spent in. You're going to spend 3 to 4 hours a week, every other week, with these people. Work with them. Remember, D&D is collaborative. It is not you versus the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master is not trying to kill you. The Dungeon Master's job is to tell the story that the players and the dice decide how it happens. Their job is to narrate that story. Narrate the consequences and the results of the dice rolls and decisions. They're not trying to kill you. They're really not. I have yet to meet one, thankfully, that have been that way. Some old school guys, maybe, but it's not DM versus player. The DM is there to tell your story and adjudicate any rules based upon whatever rules they've established and the book says. Other than that, it really is just rolling dice and math. And of course, dragons. As always, please give us a thumbs up if you like what I've talked about today. Hit that subscribe button if you have not. It really helps us content creators out. Follow me on all the socials down below. Links there. Check out my partners and sponsors as well if you would. That'd be great. Like I said, you got to support us content creators. But the biggest thing, I always say, is love each other, be nice to each other, and accept each other.